Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
It is one of those things that many of us usually are never fully prepared for, and that is the passing of someone close to us. How do we navigate through that? How do we deal with the grief that comes along with that? We're going to talk with somebody who is the president and owner of 3 funeral homes in the Queens, New York area, Martin A. Gleason Funeral Homes, and get a lot of insight. These are questions. This is things that we don't normally talk about, maybe the elephants in the room, but it is a part of life. And it makes sense to be prepared in many regards. John Golden joins us once again. Hey, John, how are you?
Good, Steve. And yourself?
Very well. Very well. It's great to have you back here. Before we begin,
Great to be back.
I want to make the distinction. There are funeral homes owned by corporations, and they're starting to swallow up some of the more family-based funeral homes. And of course, there's family-based funeral homes. The distinction between the two, can we talk about that?
Sure. In other words, we're a family-owned funeral home, and the difference is if you go to a corporate stock market-owned funeral home, the decisions are made in another state, sometimes in Texas, if it's a Service Corporation International, and the family-owned place, when you have to ask, where is your loved one going to be transferred to at the time of death? Here at Gleason's, the answer is to Gleason Funeral Home. But many of the corporate-owned funeral homes transfer the deceased. You may contact Jones Funeral Home of SCI in Flushing, and they may transfer you to Schwartz Brothers Funeral Home in the Forest Hills, and or into another borough in Manhattan where they own several funeral homes.
Wow.
And families like to know where their loved one is going to be, and they don't want them traveling, throughout the city. And the other thing is, the decisions are made locally, and we can give a fast decision. If somebody, a charity, contacts us, and we can give them a fast yes or no, whereas a corporate place, they have to get the approval a lot of times. And I have pre-arrangements even with corporately owned funeral homes. The person you see at the pre-arrangement, you're never going to see again. In most cases, they only do pre-arrangements. Here at Gleason's, our staff of funeral directors, the one that you did the pre-arrangement with, more than likely will be around when the death occurs to take care of the family. Whereas at corporate funeral homes, they just, they have a special team to do that, and that's all they do. So they go to 10 or 20 different funeral homes doing pre-arrangements. They're trained to sell, and but when the time comes, they're not on hand.
I would have to imagine too, just the level of attention, not to take anything away from the staff of the corporate owned funeral home. It's a little bit different. I believe there's a little more pride that comes into play, especially when it comes to this line of work and with a family that owns the funeral home.
Yes, the attention we give is can't be matched at a corporate-owned funeral home. We have our own hearses and limos. The corporate chain gets them from the central hub, and we know who, the driver of the limousine, and for example, in Whitestone, is going to be the neighbor, possibly, of the person that passed away, and families find comfort in dealing with local funeral directors and even chauffeurs and door attendants. It makes them feel better.
What is,
one thing?
I'm sorry, please continue.
Oh, one thing that hasn't changed in the industry is grief over loss. There's no resolution, there's no closure. There are reasons for funeral rituals. Let me give you an example of a family that decided to modernize. They opted for a direct cremation that meant no wake and no religious service, but with a memorial gathering a few months later. I explained that uh, the deceased loved one was only 40 years old. He had siblings, friends, colleagues, neighbors. I explained options such as having the wake, the religious service, and then the cremation. A family member who had recently suffered a loss lamented that she had a direct cremation and never felt the comfort and closure provided by the gathering of relatives at a wake. People want to show their respect for the deceased and the family members. You know, they act as pallbearers. They want to be words of comfort, eulogies, prayers, hugs, and tears. We try to give each family all the options to help them through a difficult time. So this particular family decided on having a wake, a mass, and then the cremation. Hundreds of people showed up at the church and the funeral home, and they came back to us a week later to thank us for giving them all their options, and they were able to grieve their loved one. And that, you can't get better than that.
Hmm. How loosely how do you define grief versus loss?
Well, it's everybody suffers a loss when a death occurs, and you know it's good to have a wake and have friends comfort you and relatives and uh, to help this difficult time of loss. And you know, it's something that has been done for years, and it's definitely helpful to the family. It gives
Sure.
them peace of mind and comfort at a difficult time. You know,
Completely.
they because grief and loss are normal processes, and most people will be forced to deal with them at some point in their lives. And many families think that cremation excludes the possibility of a wake or memorial service. They don't understand that the guest of honor, despite being cremated, can be present at the wake or the gathering and ritual. Both Dr. Earl Groman, a certified deaf educator and counselor, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross emphasized the importance and therapeutic value of viewing and grieving the body. Therefore, I think it's the responsibility of the funeral director to explain to families all the options that can be included with cremation.
Hmm. Much closure comes to those during that ceremony and that time, I would imagine.
Yes, that's true. We just had a funeral recently at a veteran cemetery. The gentleman passed away tragically in a motorcycle accident in another state, and the family was all over the country. So they had a cremation, but they decided to have a military honor ceremony at the cemetery after the cremains were interred. And they had the honor guard, the Patriot Honor Guard. They had about 40 motorcycles. They had 2 Army trucks. They had a very patriotic funeral. They had the military honors with a bugler. And the family was very happy that they did that, and it helped closure from all parts of the nation they gathered. And it was a very nice ceremony.
You have a a huge responsibility in what you do, John. From the plans, the wishes, to helping the family through this, even your funeral director is just somebody that they don't know all the options, and it's in a very emotional time. What inspired you to get to this point? I know we talked about some of your journey, but even when you were younger, as a young boy, what were you thinking? Was it something you wanted to do in terms of something connected to helping people?
Yes, it was connected to helping people. My inspirations for becoming a career professional came from my upbringing. My strong, valued parents, my brother Thomas, and the clergy. My career choice was reaffirmed by the training and professionalism displayed by funeral directors who served, especially John Gleason, who was the previous owner. And, you know, we like to help people,
Sure.
and it's a rewarding profession.
How about obstacles? I know a lot of times in our career path, I call them speed bumps. You got to get over them a little bit. What did you encounter, if anything, along the way?
One big obstacle is attracting like-minded people to work at every level in the funeral home.
Mhm.
People who are smart, kind, compassionate, and willing to do the job completely. It has become very obvious to us through our customer service surveys that customers take notice of every professional in the funeral home, from door personnel, cleaning staff, drivers, pallbearers, funeral directors, etc. As the owner and operator, I work to ensure that I keep the atmosphere at Gleason's Funeral Home a positive experience for both staff and funeral consumers, akin to my predecessor. Gleason's is both a family-owned business and a family-centric place to work,
Sure.
where employees both mingle together at work and outside of work. The hope is that the family atmosphere also extends to consumers and makes them feel at home while in our care.
I have to even imagine too, when you're in that situation, everybody is equally as important because us going through the grieving process, the funeral, the arrangements, every in a short period of time, we're just looking for help. We're looking for that compassion coming from your staff and getting that back from them and just feeling that, yeah, we're in this together. We're going to help you forward. Um, any mentors in your life, John?
Yes, I had many mentors. Of course, my parents, my brother, my sister-in-law, many great priests, especially Monsignor Pfeiffer, my friends, Vincent Carey, who's a funeral director, James Kenny, Joe Mark, John Samis, John Neiman, William Simonson, and most importantly, my wife Lori and John Gleason. Uh, I would like to think that through my faith and demeanor, I'm a mentor to all the directors and staff at Gleason's Funeral Home. While the pursuit of funeral knowledge is important, nobody has all the answers all the time. I share with my staff that what we do have all the time is the ability to remain even keeled and let our consumers know that we will obtain the answer that they are looking for and share that information in a kind and timely manner. And that kindness is important, if not more important, than having all the answers all the time. Listening to the families is paramount rather than constantly throwing information at them through a difficult time.
I want to go a little deep now into the arrangements. Something called an agent form. What exactly? I've heard of it, but I'm not really sure what that is.
Yes, the agent form is something new in New York State.
Hmm.
The agent is can be named by in a pre-arrangement by the person that's sick, or even if he's not sick. And the person named in the agent form is in charge of the funeral arrangements only. It has to be witnessed by two people, and the agent has to agree to be in the agent. And it's the agent would be in charge, especially in the state of New York now, where the majority of children rule, the majority of nephews and nieces. So this way, it eliminates any friction in the family because one of the children can be named the agent, and they are in charge. And just for the funeral only, nothing to do with the estate.
Right.
And the agent can say, the person can put in there, I made my pre-arrangements, and I wish the wake at Gleason's, the mass at St. Luke's, and the cremation. I want to be cremated and have my cremains buried at the veteran cemetery, the military, or a private cemetery. But the agent is in charge of carrying out the wishes of the deceased at the time of death.
Is it sort of the same type of thing like an executor of a will?
It's similar to an executor, but an executor is an executor till he's appointed by the court, which could take months. But the agent takes effect immediately upon the death. So he can act on making funeral arrangements immediately. Where an executor, if there's no other relatives, he could make the funeral arrangement, but he's not officially appointed by the court till the will is probated. And
So,
this could save, if there's any fights in the family, this agent form can, get you through the funeral without any question of who's in charge.
one final question on the agent form. You say it has to be witnessed by two people.
Two people. Yes.
Two people. How would it be determined who those two people are? Who would pick them? Would it be the person that the form is for? Let's say, Uncle Mike is, going through some treatment, and we just want to be sure, down the road, wherever the road leads. Would he appoint those two people?
Well, he could ask those two people to witness his signature, name,
Okay.
and an age. Or sometimes our secretaries act as witnesses if some people have nobody, and they just have a neighbor they want to name as an agent. And so if our secretaries can be witnesses,
Sure.
the funeral director cannot be an agent. It's against the law, which is a good protection. But the funeral home staff can witness, a neighbor can witness, anybody can be witnesses, but the agent can't be a funeral director that has an interest in the funeral.
Is that the witnesses? Is that almost like sort of like a notary?
It's sort of like a notary, but
Okay.
the form doesn't have to be notarized. It just
Gotcha.
has to be witnessed by two people.
Understood. What would you say somebody should know when it comes to planning or even pre-planning a funeral? Again, this can be new territory for a lot of us, and sometimes we don't want to deal with it, but it's inevitable.
Well, it's important to have an idea of what the guest of honor wants to do. Do you want to be buried at a cemetery, or do you want to be cremated? If you want to be buried at a cemetery, it's good to have the cemetery deed handy, and definitely choose a cemetery and pick out a plot and pay for it. And if you want to be cremated, it's good. What are you going to do with the cremains? It's a perpetual responsibility. In other words, you don't want to leave it to the family to have to worry about what to do, keep them at home, bury them in a grave. They have niches available at the crematories and at the cemeteries. If they're a veteran, they can be buried in the veterans military cemetery, and they get it's free of charge for the spot and the engraving. So there's a lot of things to get ready. It's good to have a power of attorney, though that ends at death, but it can be used to make pre-arrangements. Good to have a will, good to have the agent form, most especially. And you could even come in and put your wishes on file without paying, and it makes it easier for the next of kin. Your date of birth, your social security number, your mother's maiden name. A lot of information is needed to complete the death certificate. Even if have a doctor that's seeing you to sign the death certificate is something else that You have to be seen by the doctor within a month, and it's good if you're in a hospice. That's fine. The hospice doctor will issue the death certificate, but there's a lot of things to plan in advance, if possible, to make it easier for the survivors.
Would you take care of everything in a funeral situation, right down to helping somebody facilitate the engraving of a headstone? Those details. Is that something you can take care of all of that?
Well, we can take care of everything, and where we can't, we would refer the family to a professional that can help them. Like if they want to do a will, naturally we're not lawyers, so we refer them to a lawyer. If whatever regarding the funeral, we could take care of. Cemeteries, crematories, everything else, church services, rabbis.
Sure.
All are welcome.
You mentioned crematory.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody opts for cremation, are they usually going to the crematory during that process, or it's optional? I don't think a lot of us know about that.
Yeah, well, it's optional. Some families want to go to the crematory. They have a little chapel in most of the crematories. The director, a priest, a minister, a rabbi can say a few words at the crematory.
Sure.
And some family members want to see it go in the retort and push the button, and some families don't want anything to do with that. It's an individual decision. Now, what we suggest a lot is if they have a church service and they don't want to go to the crematory, we pick flowers from attributes from the flowers in the room. And after the church service, we have the friends and relatives place a flower in the casket. On top of the casket, there's a final tribute to show their love and affection for their loved one. And then at the end of that, if they don't wish to follow us to the crematory, we will go on our own. If they wish to follow to the crematory, we could do the same thing at the crematory. After prayers are said, we have everybody step forward, place a flower on top of the casket. Then if they wish, they can go home. And if not, one or two family members could, see it go in the retort and even push the button. Certain religions want to push the button. It's part of their religion. And, we give them all their options.
It's business. I understand that, but I believe it takes very special people to do what you and your staff does during a time of need, time of much emotion. But you're there to walk that journey with the people that call upon you for the 3 homes that you have. Can you give us the locations of those, John?
Yes, we have a place in Bayside on Bell Boulevard, 3646 Bell Boulevard. We're placed in Whitestone, 10-25, 150th Street in Whitestone, and one in Flushing at 14920 Northern Boulevard, Flushing, New York. And they all have large parking lots, and they're easily accessible, the handicapped accessible. And we also go throughout Nassau and Suffolk County. If the family wants us to, what we call rent another funeral home, we can do that also.
Wow, I didn't even know that was an option. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, this is why we talk. We learn.
Yes.
Again, this is not something that you can even Google these details. It's different in every state. So, John, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here again today.
Thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate it.
We'll be right
Thanks a
back.
lot.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.